Hi, thanks so much for watching LGBT 101. I like to call this activity Sticks and Stones. I wanted to give you a supplemental video as well as some additional handouts that might supplement some of the conversations that came up while you were watching that video, as well as some additional resources. If you have any questions or comments or anything, I want to try and be available to help you out as best as I can. First, I'd like to thank Rick Goodman, as well as Advantage CE, Continuing Education Seminars.com. If it weren't for them, I wouldn't be able to have recorded the webinar to begin with. If you have any questions about receiving the HR Certified Institute or HRCI CEUs, please feel free to go through the link provided. Rick and his staff are more than happy to help you. If you have any questions, you can call 1-888-267-6097. Just want to make sure that you have that available. I also like to thank GoToWebinar. I think it's a really great platform and it makes this all super easy and accessible, and I just think it's great. Now, speaking of being accessible, if you have any questions or comments or anything, I like to be available. So feel free to send me a text message to 202-670-4262. That's 202-670-4262. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have at any point in time. Just send me a text. You're also welcome to email me at engage@goodenoughnow.com. Want even more? Go to Kiwi Live. Kiwi like the fruit, live like not dead.com. It'll ask you for a keyword. Type in my last name, Pettit. Pettitt. Pettitt. This will give you some more handouts and some links to videos and things like that. I'm just here to help. Thanks so much. Now, let's review the handouts that are here to also help you customize them. You're welcome to put them out into your own workplace or your organization. Whatever it is you need to be helpful, I try to make myself available. This particular handout is usually called the Reversal Questionnaire. It was also developed by Vernon Wall, who's a dear friend of mine, and we both worked with the American College Personnel Association Roadshow, which was an organization that traveled around the country offering LGBT ally trainings. In this context, he created this form for, generally speaking, heterosexual or straight identified people to have a conversation with themselves or others. I think it's more fun in groups, but I'm an extrovert. But to be able to have a conversation to talk about where power and privilege actually intersects with one's sexual identity or sexual orientation. The reversal questionnaire is probably handfuls of questions of things that may seem super simple and really not a very complicated thing. But I think it's really important to think about and stop and see, where do you feel and how is it different for you, for your partner, for your family, for children, for neighbors, for coworkers, your favorite barista. If you're able to go through these questions and really ask and sit and think, what's interesting is that patterns will show up. When these patterns show up, there's going to be some things that you really like. There's going to, you're fine, this is good, this is how you feel, and I think that that's fine. A lot of times in the context of a diversity training, we feel like we have to format our hard drive, and we're not allowed to think or feel any way that we were brought up or what we may believe. And I don't think that's true. What I want you to do is to go through this reverse questionnaire, and then I want you to notice the patterns. Some of those patterns you're going to like. Great. Keep them. Now you know which pieces of you feel really secure about. Then the pieces that you don't like, maybe pull those out, highlight them with a different color. Then there's going to probably be a couple of other things left, and somewhere in the middle you kind of don't know how you feel. I think that that's also illuminating. Now, once you have the good, the I don't really know, and the ones that you don't like, now you know what you can focus on. So let's start with the ones that you know you don't like. I am not a fan of this. I do not like this. Great, let's look at those. So of the ones that you don't like, what is unchangeable? Sometimes it's just not changeable. So that's something that you really need to note. So you would like something about you that you don't like. Well, if it's unchangeable, then there's nothing you can do about it. So I'm a big fan of don't waste your time on that. If you can't do anything about it, then learn to like it or learn to get comfortable with it. Or at minimum, put it over in that middle group. Now, there's some things about you that you don't like. So I know for me, for example, I tried really, really hard. I don't like that I use violent language at all. It doesn't fit who I am. It's not in line with my morality or it's not incongruent with how I believe the world should be. So I decided I was going to try really hard to not use any violent-based language. So I started paying attention to all the words that were coming out of my mouth and on emails and in letters and notes. And what I realized is that not only do I swear, and I blame my grandmother for that, but I also punch buttons in elevators, my cell phone blows up, things like that. And I realized there's so much violence in the language that I use that it was taking an exorbitant amount of energy. And so I kind of edited it halfway through, and I've just decided to accept I use violent-based language, and that is incongruent with who I am as a person. That's called self-reflection, and it's taking responsibility for what you're actually doing. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that, especially if you're consciously making the decision. Now, there will still be some things in your I don't like this pile, but now you know where to focus. So don't focus on them all at once. Just pick one and really pay attention to it. Maybe do some research or watch some movies, get on Netflix, read some articles, meet some people, talk to people. Really sincerely listen. Engage in conversations with genuine curiosity, and perhaps you'll be able to figure out a way out of what you don't like, and that way you might like. Then there was that middle category, that I don't really know category. I think that we're really complicated human beings, and there's nothing wrong with being complicated. As you sit in that kind of complicated place, see if there's any patterns in it. And of the patterns, are there ones you like? Are there ones you don't like? And is there stuff that's just complicated? If you land at just complicated, congratulations. Welcome on being a complicated human being. If you've sifted through and some of them ended up back in something that you don't like, repeat the previous process. Then lastly, you have the pile of yourself that you really do like. You have the patterns of how you answered these questions, as well as patterns of your behaviors or lack thereof, your relationships, your communications. You have the patterns that you'll represent, and some of them you really like. What I think is important about this is that those you can celebrate. That's who you are. Be proud. Now, the other bonus that's about this process is that you have an automatic accountability buddy for this process. What I mean by that is that as you're uncovering patterns, try in a judgment-free way to determine if you like them or don't like them, or if they're in that kind of fuzzy middle. But if you're trying to make meaning of them, you can really think about it a lot, and sometimes you just don't know. But your accountability buddy is your best friend, right? Some of us have way more than one best friend even, so that's great. You have free resources surrounding you to help you out with this process. So what I encourage you to do is to pick one of your patterns, call a best friend up and say, hey, I've noticed this thing. Do you have any thoughts on this? Interestingly, is your best friend will determine whether or not you're ready to know if they have any actual thoughts. So just keep trying. If you don't believe me, think about the last time your best friend dated someone that you did not approve of. Were you right? Of course you were, because your best friend is a hot mess. So is mine. But we like them anyway, right? Now, the tricky part is that there is something that you are doing that they like you anyway for. What I mean is that I'm doing something that my best friend is like, oh, there she goes again. But my best friend's still my best friend. But if I could actually become aware of what that pattern is, and I could actually do something about it, it'd be a win for me and a win for my best friend. It goes both ways. Check in with your best friend. Check in and find out really what are the patterns of you and how you show up. Specifically when it is in regards to sexuality, sexual identity, relationships, showing physical affection, being sexual. Chances are that there's a lot of patterns there. Some of those patterns may be connected to power or privilege or the lack thereof. They also may kind of move their tentacles into other areas that are really relevant and important to diversity, whether we're talking about race or class or age or size, religion, areas and regions of the country. All of these things are relevant. And when you understand those patterns and you can see them in multiple contexts, I believe it's then that you're actually starting to take responsibility for how we show up and all of our relationships. Ultimately, I believe that is the most important thing to do. When we talk about really serving people, it's important to understand that we have to first serve ourselves. In these particular conversation that we had for this particular training, we started at language, and we started at stereotypes and trends and rumors and famous people and hobbies and habits and things like this. But if you look back over those lists, the patterns of those lists also really show a lot about how sexism shows up when we talk about sexuality, how we typically keep men at the center and men's sexuality at the center of things. We don't always have a completely egalitarian conversation. And sometimes that affects us personally and our personal relationships. But the key piece is that it always impacts us as far as being a member in this community. I think it's really important to understand that we're responsible for how we show up. We're responsible for the language we use. We're responsible for our behaviors that affect other people, whether it's conscious or unconscious. I ask that in your own reflections, if you can determine the patterns of your behavior that you like and the patterns of the behavior that you're not so much a fan of, the complications of the middle, realize that each one of us is the same in that way. Every single one of us is doing the best we can with what we've got some of the time. For me, for some people, it's a little harder to give them that grace. For other people, it seems to be easy. That's also a pattern I'm responsible for. But if I'm doing the best I can some of the time with what I got, then maybe you are too. And by being able to kind of hold that, then what I'm able to do is to connect with someone in a curiously genuine way so that we can generously exchange our authentic selves with one another. This may seem kind of woo-woo, and I do live in California. But what I think is important is that when we talk about being vulnerable with one another, we often don't talk about the strength required of that vulnerability. I called this activity Sticks and Stones, and the main reason why is that often we talk about physical violence or physical injury, but the mental, emotional, and spiritual damage that these incongruent patterns can have can really be way more damaging than a broken bone or a bruise. Those things can heal. In order for our mental, emotional, and spiritual selves to heal, we have to be able to stop, take responsibility, be personally reflective, and really feel heard. And I think the key piece there is being able to take responsibility for holding a space to genuinely and with great curiosity listen to someone else's story. Thank you for spending time and watching the LGBT 101 video. This pack comes with 3 other videos which hopefully you're taking advantage of. One is Inclusion Beyond the Law. Another one is Facing Trans. We'll be looking specifically at trans inclusion and transition accommodations. And then lastly, it's Being a Better Ally. Being a Better Ally really does focus on these listening and conversation skills. So hopefully that'll be helpful. Again, if you have any comments or questions or anything, drop me an email, send me a text at 202-670-4262. That's 202-670-4262. You're also welcome to go to Kiwi, like the fruit, kiwilive.com. That process will ask you for a keyword, and you type in my last name, Pettit, P-E-T-T-I-T-T, and that'll give you additional handouts and videos and links and things like that that may be of help. The handout for this particular piece, again, is that reversal questionnaire. I highly recommend you take it out, do it kind of as a self-assessment, and then for fun, see how different people's self-assessments fit in. What were those patterns? What do people shift when they go to work versus going to an event or a meeting or being home or in their own home communities? I think that shifting is also a really fascinating conversation starter. And if you can start the conversation, you can keep it stirring. And if you can keep it stirring, then your skills and your tools are going to be plenty sharp just in time for when you need them. Thank you again, and I look forward to seeing you at the next video.